Hey guys, welcome into another episode of Britt's Fantasy Blitz. We are back from the expo. I'm ready to rock and roll. I'm your host, Britt Flynn. Thank you so much for joining us. Man, we've got real live football on TV last night. We had a little bit yesterday with the Browns, but now we've got a couple games tonight, a bunch of games going on this weekend, and a couple of the starters are going to play. So we're finally going to get a glimpse of some of these players who we've had questions about all off season long. If you're in the chat, please like, subscribe, comment. We'd love to get you involved in this show. Thank you to our producer, Ernie Acosta. Today, we've got a bunch of news. I want to recap that game last night between the Browns and the Eagles. I want to talk about some of the news, some of the games tonight, some of the injury news, the training camp hype. We're going to talk about some underdog higher or lower pick'ems for tonight's game. And we are going to be joined by Nate Paulvote to talk about some ADP values and fades. So let's get right into it. Good afternoon, honey. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it. So let's talk about the game last night, right? Man, I was hoping to get some clarity out of this Eagles backfield, but we have none. I wrote an article over at Fantasy Alarm about what to make of this backfield and how to value them at ADP. And we still really don't have any idea. You know, DeAndre Swift sat out last night when the other week it was Gainwell and Boston Scott. Gainwell really didn't look that good. Boston Scott and Gainwell came in and played a couple of series. Penny came in, then Trey Sermon came in, didn't really look that great. And although he did end up scoring a 33-yard touchdown, there's still just no real clarity in this backfield. Some of the pundits have said that Rashad Penny may be on the cut list. I don't exactly agree with that. I think that he's showing some signs of life. It's going to be really, really, really messy as it gets going further into the season. We're going to have to watch how it plays out. Another thing to take away from the game, Marcus Mariota looked horrible, like very horrible. I don't even know how he is still the second string quarterback in this situation. If Jalen Hurts goes down for any reason or any amount of time, the Eagles are in trouble. And especially since Nick Sirianni said today that he is still not open to having a competition for the QB2 spot. And Tanner McKee looked pretty good. Hurts has missed a couple of games here and there due to injury because he is an aggressive player. He likes to run. He likes to implement the QB sneak. And the last time he did, he's been hurt the past couple of seasons. Then you look at guys like Patrick Mahomes, who said today that Andy Reid doesn't even allow him to run the quarterback sneak because the last time he did, he dislocated his kneecap. So either we see Hurts scale it back to preserve his health, or we might deal with another minor injury or two. Something to watch. Hi, Scott. Hi, Mr. Scampers. Great to have you guys in the chat. Another takeaway from yesterday's game is that rookie Cedric Tillman looked really, really good. I honestly would not be surprised to see him take over Donovan Peoples-Jones' role outside as we get further through the season. He was great in Tennessee. Some people say that his injury is the only reason that Jalen Hyatt was able to kind of exceed and excel and win the Blitnikoff last season. So it's going to be very interesting and exciting to watch him. Tonight, we get the Panthers and Giants as well as the Bengals and Falcons. So there are several storylines we want to watch, and me in particular. First off, I want to see Bryce Young. He had a horrible, horrible game against the Jets. I mean, just looked awful. They got shut out. I think it was the largest margin of a shutout in Jets preseason history. Will Bryce Young play better tonight? And will he see more playing time? Or will they just continue to ease him in? Another question that I have is in the Bengals and Falcons, are we going to see Bijan Robinson? He suited up last week, but he didn't hit the field. And I am dying to see him in action. I've been so high on Bijan all offseason long. I know what a generational talent he is. I want to see him in that offense and see how they incorporate him, even if just for a little bit. Another thing that I want to see tonight is, will Joe Burrow be throwing on the sidelines? Will we get any indication of how he's progressing from the calf injury? And if you remember last week, we kind of saw him running and throwing on the field. So even if he doesn't play, I want to see the warm up. That said, I totally know that the pregame of the preseason is a little wild to be interested in, but y'all are just going to have to give me a pass on this. I need to see it. Finally, I want to see how Jalen Hyatt looks. He received criticism because of his limited route tree. On the other hand, we've seen his elite speed, but last week, he only was out there for a very limited time and caught maybe one pass or one target. Not great for your receiver who we think is going to be heavily involved in the mix. So I'm very interested in seeing how he looks. On to some top news across the NFL today. After yesterday, with Ron Rivera saying that he wasn't ready to name Sam Howell the starter, he suddenly just did a 180 and this morning made a decision that Howell is going to start week 1. This has led to so many people on Twitter in various fantasy leagues reach out, try to trade for Sam Howell in Superflex leagues. I mean, the overreaction about Sam Howell starting is kind of insane. We were talking about it yesterday on the Alarm Fantasy Football Show. There were people in the chat saying, what is the over under on when Sam Howell will be benched for Jacoby Brissett? I'm kind of in that camp. I know that you need to see what Sam Howell has to offer, how he's going to look. But personally, I don't think he's going to look that good. And I think that his tenure as a starter is going to be relatively short lived. So that's another thing to watch. Dame Overboard, great to see you in the chat. Great to see everybody interacting. We love this. So Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski is backing kicker Cade York after missing 2 would-be game-winning field goals last night. Throughout his career, York has kind of been inconsistent. His field goal percent is only 75% in 2022. And so far in this preseason, it's only been 50%. 50. The AFC North is going to be so tough and so competitive. It's going to come down to a ton of close games where they may have to rely on their kicker. I know it's hard to find a clutch kicker, but as a Dallas fan, I can say the one thing that I'm worried about on that offense is their kicker. It's not easy to find somebody who comes in clutch when you need them to, but kicker is one of the least forgiving positions in the league. And if you miss out, I mean, you're out. I think that York could end up costing them, and Stefanski really needs to just kind of step back, take a look in the mirror, take a look at his division, and see if this is going to work or not. In other AFC North news, the Ravens signed cornerback Ronald Darby yesterday after news that Marcus Peters is going to miss quite a bit of time due to a foot injury and subsequent surgery. Darby's also had injury issues of his own after tearing his ACL in week 5 last year, but if he is back to form, he's going to be an important addition to the secondary that was absolutely plagued by injuries last season. The Ravens are also adding Jadeveon Clowney to bulk up their offensive line, but I'm not really sure how much to put into that. Clowney's kind of bounced around from team to team to team. He's also been injured, hasn't really done much with his career. So we need to see if that's just a fill in piece or if he's actually going to do something on this offense. Some training camp hype. We've actually gotten a little bit of clarity about the Packers offense after some joint practices this week, but it's been very hit or miss. Through 125 reps at joint practices with the Bengals and Patriots, Love completed 48 of 91 passes for 532 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. He's been relying heavily on the short and intermediate passes to Romeo Doubs and Luke Musgrave. Watson's also kind of been making some big plays downfield, but I'm concerned about the consistency of Jordan Love. I mean, a 52% completion rate is not great, to say the least. His interceptions and his ball security have been something that have plagued him going back to his college days at Utah State, where in his final year, he had a 20-17 touchdown to interception ratio. If that pattern continues, I think that Green Bay is going to end up running the ball a ton more, and Jordan Love and Christian Watson may get phased out a little bit. So we'll have to see. The New England Patriots, however, have been dropping a potential hint about Ezekiel Elliott's usage in their system because in their joint practice against the Packers, Zeke was getting a quote, good amount of goal line work, something that he excelled at in Dallas over the past 2 seasons. People think that he may be washed in terms of his explosive ability, and, admittedly, that's up for debate, but he can still get it done in short yardage situations. He's still going at an aggregate ADP of 156.91. And at that cost, I am more than willing to take a chance on a touchdown dependent back. Mr. Scampers in the chat says, I think Clowney is a good pass rush depth piece, plus 2 revenge games versus the Browns. I think I'd have to agree with you there, Mr. Scampers. You might be onto something. As long as he can stay healthy, that's been the big crux of his career. We know how talented he is, but it's just been a little hit or miss lately. In final training camp news, man, Anthony Richardson is showing off a cannon at camp. The latest video circulating on Twitter has shown him leaping into the air and throwing the ball, in my opinion, at least 60 yards downfield. This pure athleticism cannot be taught. And if he can develop and do even half of what he's doing right now in camp in a normal game, he is going to be so exciting to watch. A little bit of injury news, nothing major, but we still need to touch on it. The Lions are now waiving Denzel Mims after he suffered an injury in camp that is going to require rehab. This wide receiver room in Detroit, man, it is dangerously thin. And I would not be surprised if the Lions are forced to go out and add somebody who's on the free agent market or even trade for somebody. You've got Jameson Williams, who is hurt and suspended, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who injured his ankle earlier this week. Then you've got guys like Marvin Jones, Khalif Raymond. I mean, this wide receiver room is so just perilously thin that the Lions need to do something in their wide receiver room. Another wide receiver room that's kind of thin is the Indianapolis Colts. They placed Ashton Dulin on injured reserve. That's going to end his season after he suffered a torn ACL. Now, while I think that this may end up opening a path for Josh Downs to see more snaps throughout the season, after Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce, they really don't have another proven receiver. They've just got kind of a hodgepodge of guys that they can throw in there. Even their tight ends, Jelani Woods and Mo Alley Cox, are currently suffering with injuries. So they're another one that I would not be surprised to see potentially go out, pick up a depth piece just to add some more security to their wide receiver room. You can follow all of this. I know that the injuries have been popping up like crazy. The training camp injury report is available in our Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide, and it's being updated daily. Trust me, I'm getting carpal tunnel. My thumbs are cramping. There are so many injuries that I'm inputting constantly. Go check out that injury report as well as the rest of the stuff in our Fantasy Alarm Draft Guide, and go to fantasyalarm.com/draft to get that. We also have our cheat sheet, which was updated just a couple of days ago with news of the Dalvin Cook signing, the Ezekiel Elliott signing. Where do people move up and down in the ranks? You can go check that out in our cheat sheet and purchase that separately if you would like as well. Or if you are a DFS player like me and so many others of us are, go ahead and sign up for our All Pro package. We have all sports, the playbooks, the tools, all the draft guide, the cheat sheet, everything on our site is included in that All Pro package. Just go ahead and join the family. Sign up with that with fantasyalarm.com/draft guide or /all pro, today, and join the family. Get access to everything before the season. Coming up next, we have Nate Paulvote. We are going to talk a little bit, have a Fantasy Friday football happy hour like we always like to do. We're going to recap some stuff from the Expo. We're going to talk some underdog fades and ADPs and value ADPs when he gets in here. But I think we're going to go ahead and take a break while we wait on him to get here, and we'll see you back in a couple seconds.
The Detroit Lions select Sam Laporta, tight end, Iowa.
Had to go with your boy Sam Laporta there to pair with TJ Hawkinson.
Sammy.
I couldn't double down on rookie tight ends. I think that's taking it a little too far.
This could be one of the most exciting rookie tight end classes in a while, just based on the archetypes of these guys, and the Dalton Kincaids and the Sam Laportas. Obviously, Green Bay drafted 2 themselves with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. So after Kincaid, I would say is probably the consensus with tight ends. Like, who do you like as far as the best ball, like an end of best ball? Do you like Laporta, or is there anybody else you like more?
I do like Laporta. We're looking for guys that can be a top 2 target on their team. So any argument you could make, right? So you can make the argument that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a top 2 target with after Stephon Diggs. You can make an argument that with Jamison Williams suspended, now Sam Laporta is just going to play straight up wide receiver. He looks like a wide receiver. Why can't he line up out wide at split end, right? It's like Marvin Jones and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would also throw another name in the ring, and I don't mind, since we're doing this for the fans, for the kids. He's still on the board. Luke Musgrave on your Packers. They're not super loaded at wide receiver. We like the guy Reed they drafted, but you never know. So why can't Luke Musgrave be a big slot? In fact, they drafted 2 tight ends, Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft is more of an inline guy. They might just go 2 tight ends right away. Tucker Kraft inline, Luke Musgrave in the slot. Why can't he be a target monster for Jordan Love? So those are the guys, those are the conditions that you need for a rookie tight end to succeed. They need to not only be the best pass catching tight end on the team, but a top 2 pass catcher on the team outright. That's how you get Kyle Pitts. Evan Ingram as a rookie was top 5 because Odell Beckham Jr. hurt his knee 4 weeks into the year. So that's the formula. We're looking for guys that can actually be a top target right away. Otherwise, we're playing the sit and wait long-term game, which is what you're doing with guys like Michael Mayer.
Welcome back, guys. We are back with Britt's Fantasy Blitz. Again, if you're just now joining us, I am your host, Britt Flynn. We've got a very special guest coming up. Great technology. Laptop froze. So we're going to wait on him while he reboots and gets in here. But we met each other at the Fantasy Football Expo. Had a great time. If you have not gone to the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio, I cannot recommend it enough. There is so much cool stuff going on there. There are so many cool people. Being in not just a room, but in a convention, in a space with everybody who shares like-minded ideas is such a fun time. And then you meet people who you only see on the internet, and you just are able to form such a deeper connection. And it's so awesome. I believe Nate is here, so we're going to go ahead and bring him in. Like I said, met him at the expo. Wonderful, wonderful time. Nate, how's it going, dude?
Oh, my computer, man. I'm on Jen's computer. Mine wouldn't get started for me. So I'm glad to be here. I'm excited. I'm excited to chop it up with you. We had a great time at the expo, so let's keep it going.
We had so much fun at the expo. Where can I start? Even the Lyft ride from the airport to Canton, the time at Fatheads, drafting with Jen was wonderful. Yes. That was so much fun in the Queen's Classic. So you're with Fantasy Pros, Razzball, the FF Dino Diehards, and FF Face Off. So you're like all over the place, right?
It's true. I am all over the place. Face Off is kind of a new thing, which I'm revamping our YouTube channel. So I'm really excited about that. We've got a lot of new content coming out this season. Then with Razzball, I do Dino Diehards, and it's a blast. I get to focus on Dynasty Fantasy Football, which is one of my passions with my buddy Matt Chester, which you got to hang out with a little bit, I believe, at the expo. Always fun. Like, I just, doing this, I'll work for anybody. I just have so much fun doing it. I'd put in 80 hours a week if I could.
You're like, I have so many thoughts in my brain. I just need to get them out. I need to have it. Like, oh man. Yeah. Your computer situation, that happened to me on Monday. Apparently over the weekend, while I was at the expo, the computer updated and none of my equipment connected. It just like knocked out all the settings. So like, can we just all agree that technology is so cool?
It doesn't stress me out at all. Not even a little bit.
Yeah, never at all. So we've got a couple people in the chat. Scott Frankel's hanging out with us. Yes. Mr. Scampers, Dame Overboard. My husband's lurking around in there somewhere in between delivering mail. Hopefully not hitting any curbs or getting any more flat tires today. That was not fun. So before we get into this, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of your draft ideology. I know that you like Dynasty, but as far as redraft and like best ball goes, do you subscribe to the zero running back, like the anchor running back? How do you typically like to draft?
So I'm usually a hero running back guy. I get my big marquee running back in the first 2 rounds. Depending on what's around in the first round, I tend to go running back first round. And then I punt on the running back until sometimes the 7th, 8th, 9th round. And I stack up on wide receivers, tight ends. If it's super flex, obviously quarterbacks. That has really done me well the last 2 seasons. I've won a lot more, and I've gotten a lot more depth at receiver and tight end that way.
I think the way that the landscape of fantasy football is shifting, right? Everybody's going so wide receiver heavy that you almost have to avoid not being left out in the cold on your wide receivers. Coop was talking about it last hour during his show about how many running backs were going in the top 14 picks. This year, there have only been, I think, 5 or 6 in the top 14 picks, which is so different from even, 5 or 6 years ago when I started playing. So it's interesting to see how we've adjusted and adapted. And you've got to chase value there, right? So
100%.
Yeah. So that's why we're going to talk about a little bit of ADP values, because when it comes to you can't leave it out there. It's like Goodwill, right? You're going to a thrift store. You see something that's cheap and good and on sale, you got to get it. So I want to talk a little bit about ADP values on Underdog specifically. Your quarterbacks, I love.
All right.
Who are your quarterbacks?
Well, Britt, I don't have access to my show sheet right now.
Oh, well,
because I'm on my wife's computer here.
Let me pop this
I know,
over to
what
you
a
in the
mess.
chat.
Let me see here.
You know what? No,
I'm smarter than this, Britt. I'm smarter than this. I once had to do a show. I was with Bob Harris on Player Profiler. My power blew out, and I was the show host.
No.
Went out mid-show. The transformer blew was so loud, I'm glad nobody saw me in the moment. I had to get back on my phone. Sometimes we have to do weird things.
Oh,
it's just the nature of technology in the business. And now I can tell you my first one, my value, who I love right now, is Jared Goff. He's going QB 17 on Underdog. And we saw what he did in that offense last season. They've only gotten better. They added Sam Laporta. They brought back veteran Marvin Jones, who from a fantasy perspective has almost no value. But in that offense, what he does from just a locker room perspective is huge. And I love Dan Campbell. And I have this weird thing where I believe in this team. And I don't know exactly why. On paper, I shouldn't necessarily. But I think Jared Goff is a guy who finishes as a top 10 quarterback this season. If you're getting him at QB 17, I mean, that's a huge steal.
Yeah, I think people like to shy away from him a little bit because of that narrative that followed him over from Los Angeles, that he wasn't any good. And remember, even when he got traded, people were like, oh, the Rams paid the Lions to take him off their hands. But you look at his numbers last year, he was pretty good, especially indoors. When he gets to play indoors, he's amazing. I am a little bit worried just about the wide receiver depth. But then you think about, like you said, Laporta, add in Jahmyr Gibbs in there. I mean, he's going to have weapons. The kneecap biting aspect of this offense is just going to be so good, and people are sleeping on him. So I completely agree with that. I'm in a similar situation. Right next to Goff in ADP is Aaron Rodgers at QB 16. It's another weird situation, right? How are people sleeping on a 4-time MVP who just happened to have a down season last year because he had 2 rookie receivers who were hurt for a big part of the season? He was injured a little bit himself. Like, I think he had some kind of thumb injury or something, and he still finished as QB 13. Now he goes to the Jets. He's got Garrett Wilson. He brought all his buddies over with Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb. They added in McCole Hardman. He's got a very strong running game behind him, and yet he's still going as QB 16. It doesn't really make any sense to me.
No, it mystifies me because these are some of the best weapons he's had. He's had very good weapons at times in Green Bay. And in those seasons, what has he done? He's won MVPs. He's been a top 5 fantasy quarterback. He's going to be 40. But what did Tom Brady do in his 40s? Like, these guys condition differently these days. This isn't the George Blanda smoking a cigarette on the sideline at 48, like going in and playing 30 snaps type scenario here. This is a guy who's in peak physical condition. I mean, I wish I was in his shape. I wish. And he's going to go out there with a good team, and he has something to prove. He has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove he can do it somewhere else, and especially in the Big Apple. Like, all lights are on Aaron Rodgers, and I think this is where he succeeds. I think this is what he's wanted his whole career. He could turn in a top 5 quarterback season. Do I think it's super likely? No, but I do think he turns in a top 10.
Yeah, absolutely. He is in his city boy era. He showed up with like some new clothes, a new haircut. He's got this really cool, like, I don't know if you've seen it on Hard Knocks, but the secret handshake with Sauce Gardner.
Yeah.
It's perfect. I love it. This guy has something to prove. The only thing that I worry about with him, and I will say this in full transparency, they need to get that O-line together. But Mekhi Becton is still practicing with the second team. I think once he gets back going, we're not really going to see the issues that we've seen in preseason. So moving on to running backs, because there are a ton of running backs that are either overvalued or undervalued. And as somebody who is a hero running back drafter, we live for that value in these later rounds for running backs. So I'm curious to see who you think fits that mold.
I am really hot on Rachaad White in Tampa Bay, Britt. We saw what he did last season in an offense that didn't really need him to be what he was. It was a pass-first offense. He caught 89% of his passes from Tom Brady last season. That's nothing to shake a stick at. And in an offense where we're looking at either Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask at quarterback, probably Baker Mayfield to start, I would assume. We're going to see a lot of those running back check down plays, and Rachaad White's going to be the beneficiary of a lot of that. Not to mention, the dude can run. Giving him a full season as the back, we've got Chase Edmonds there. Is he a threat? No, he's absolutely not a threat to Rachaad White. And if he's going as RB28 right now on Underdog, this is a guy who could turn in, I mean, a low-end RB2 or a high-end RB2, low-end RB1 season if everything falls right. I don't know why you wouldn't be in on him at that valuation right now.
Yeah, the pass catching alone for me makes me very in on him. I know that people like to sneeze at his inefficiency actually running the ball last year. But if you look at the state of that offensive line was in shambles last year. Now they've got Jensen back. They drafted Cody Mock. I mean, this is a different O-line that's blocking and protecting. I think he can even be efficient as a pure runner, let alone all those checkdowns, like you said, from Baker Mayfield that he's going to get. Absolutely love it. I'm kind of on the same track as you are, but with a different running back. I'm on Antonio Gibson, who's going RB32 on Underdog. We continuously just poo-poo Antonio Gibson because he's never lived up to his potential. Yes, he was an ex-wide receiver in Memphis, but he's never really done anything. Well, that's because J.D. McKissick has been there. McKissick is gone, for one. So Antonio Gibson is in line for that pass down work. And then they bring in Eric Bieniemy, who, look at what he did last season in Kansas City. He took like a 32-year-old running back, made him a pass catching weapon who ended up in the top of the fantasy, lineup at the end of the season. I see no reason why Antonio Gibson can't do that on his own. And then you factor in that Ron Rivera said that Sam Howell is going to be the starter. I think it's going to be that same thing as Baker Mayfield. It's going to be check down city. Low ADOT, low situation. He's going to get pressured. He's not going to have time to look downfield for McLaurin. Gibson is set to eat. And at RB32, give me all that food.
No, it's beautiful. And this is setting up to be such a perfect situation for Gibson. And I want to go back to something that you said. You said he didn't live up to expectations. To be fair, his expectations were that he was the second coming of CMC. And that's really unfair to put on any player. Gibson has played well. But we have to remember that he was a converted wide receiver, like you said. So sometimes this conversion takes a lot. He had one season in college where he got to play running back, comes to the NFL, a whole different speed of game. You feel like at some point he's going to catch up because we've seen the flashes of talent. We know it's there. And like you said, with J.D. McKissick gone, he assumes that pass catching role. Robinson's probably going to get most of the goal line carries. But again, injuries happen. And if Brian Robinson misses a game or two, we could see Antonio Gibson carve out a bigger role in this offense. And at RB32, there's not a whole lot of risk there where you're getting him.
No, not at all. And this is probably going to be a cliche. I know that Howard Bender and Andrew Cooper say this all the time, but running is the luxury of the winning team and I don't see a lot of winning from the Commanders.
Hmm.
So Brian Robinson could be, I'm not going to say phased out, but not have as heavy as a workload as Gibson, because Gibson is the pass catching back. So going to be super interesting. Your wide receiver, I'm very interested about, because that offense as a whole, I'm a little interested in what you have to say.
So I like Zay Flowers coming into the draft. For me, a lot of the draft is about situation year one with these rookies, and he seriously could not be in a better situation. They brought in Todd Monken from Georgia. The guy likes to pass. I actually just wrote something about their offense the other day for Fantasy Pros. And what's interesting, if you go back and you look at Monken when he was in Tampa Bay from 2016 to 2019, he didn't have a season where the quarterback threw for less than 4,000 yards or 25 touchdowns. They spread the ball out. They didn't have a season but one in those 4 years where they had less than 3 receivers with more than 80 targets. Monken's going to spread the ball out. He was the architect of Jameis Winston's 5,000-yard, 33 touchdown season. I think Lamar wants to throw. We know Lamar can throw. You have to wonder if he can get to that 4,000-yard mark in this offense, but I think he can. And Zay Jones is the wide receiver one in an offense that's about to get a lot more pass heavy. We've heard Lamar be vocal about not wanting to run quite as much, and he seems to be connecting with Zay Flowers in camp. He's better. He's a better receiver than Bateman. So he's really competing with Mark Andrews for targets, ultimately for the high value ones. And Zay Flowers can stretch the field. And he's an elite route runner. And you're getting him at what, wide receiver 41? This guy could be a wide receiver 2 this season. Very easily could be a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, it does seem a little low for him when you look at that air raid spread offense. My concern with the Ravens is that they still have Mark Andrews and they still have Isaiah Likely. So I'm wondering how much they're going to put those guys in there as part of the 4 receivers, and kind of phase everybody else, just rotate them in and out. But I do love Zay Flowers' talent. You know, you don't put up those kinds of numbers, especially at Boston College, and you're not good. I mean, he could have come out last year, but he chose to come back to Boston College, did even better, and then, you know, has just done completely amazing. So I'm still on the fence just because I don't know, and I'm very risk averse, and it frightens me. I
get
I'm just a big old scaredy cat.
I get it. I take too many risks sometimes playing fantasy football, but a lot of times they pay off, and for me, that's how you win. And I think at wide receiver 41, I don't know that there's a whole ton of risk there in an offense where he's going to see 80 to 90 targets as like a floor in that offense.
Yeah, that risk versus reward is something that I would be willing to take. I'm right next to you with my pick. I've got Brandon Cooks going at wide receiver 42 on Underdog. I don't know why this guy keeps getting so much disrespect. Like, bring in the Rodney Dangerfield. I get no respect, because this is what happens to Brandon Cooks in fantasy drafts. He's been getting rave reviews in camp. And if you look at his track record, he's put up 1,000 yards with every single team that he's been with throughout his career. I mean, sure, he's older. He was hurt last year, but this is a new year on a much more competitive offense. And Dak Prescott does have a history of supporting 2 top wide receivers. So I think at wide receiver 42, he's a steal. And that injury risk, much like Zay Flowers, you're getting him at wide receiver 42. That risk just really isn't there.
Well, I understand why people are apprehensive about Cooks. They're looking at this offense where McCarthy just canned Kellen Moore because he wanted to throw the ball too much, and they're afraid that they're just going to run. But what do they have at running back? They've got Tony Pollard, and Ronald Jones really is their running back room right now. They're going to throw the ball more than people think. And I was convinced of this yesterday by our buddy Kevin Tompkins on our Die Hard show. I don't love Dak Prescott. Like, I'll just be really upfront about that. But I do love Brandon Cooks, and everybody does sleep on him. And I think a wide receiver 42, what are you asking him to get? Again, 80 targets, maybe 90. Dalton Schultz isn't there anymore. I mean, is Jake Ferguson really going to thieve that many targets from the wide receivers? More than likely not. So I could see him finishing in that wide receiver like 24 to like 28 range maybe. And it's still wide receiver 42. That's a steal.
Yeah, I completely agree. Even when we thought CeeDee Lamb was going to go off and be great and he disappointed, he was still in that wide receiver 2 range. And that's exactly what I think Cooks can deliver. On our tight end values, you and I had the same one. So I want to talk about him first, and then we'll go to your individual one since I stole this from you. But it's Sam Laporta. People are still sleeping on Sam Laporta. We talked about it earlier about how bereft the Lions are of pass catching weapons, and people are still sleeping on Laporta. There's a ton of hype around Dalton Kincaid, which in my opinion is rightfully so, but it seems like Laporta is getting overlooked for the Kincaid hype, and he shouldn't be. The Lions have very few receiving options. Laporta should be incorporated into this offense early. His college tape speaks for itself. I mean, he played for Iowa. He was a lone bright spot on that Iowa offense. He's 91st percentile in speed for his size. He's already been drawing rave reviews in camp. Aside from the whole rookie tight ends don't pan out thing, what is there not to like about Sam Laporta?
Absolutely nothing. And I get because generally rookie tight ends don't pan out. Pat Freiermuth did a little. He had a pretty good second half of his rookie season. But most rookie tight ends don't end up in a situation like this, where they just traded away TJ Hawkinson last season. Brock Wright's not the guy. I mean, everybody knows that. He's a blocking tight end. And Sam Laporta played at Iowa and was a freak athlete. He was the only thing Iowa fans really had to cheer for last season, because that offense was just absolutely putrid. And it goes like this. It's Amon-Ra, then it's Sam Laporta, then it's everybody else in that offense they're going to throw to. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is probably in that mix there too. But the guy's going to get wide receiver volume, at least the first 6 games without Jameson Williams. And we've seen Jameson Williams having issues in camp. He got hurt. He's had attitude problems. So what's Jameson Williams even going to be? Laporta could have carved himself out a role by the time Williams comes back, where nope, Laporta's getting 7 to 8 to 9 targets a game anyway. Doesn't matter.
Yep, I completely agree. The Williams, I think I said that he was heading for bust material the way that he's been looking. And I completely agree. I think that Laporta, if he has a good showing these first 6 games, going to crush it. We've got Scott Frankel in the chat saying that Mike Gesicki is the best tight end value in the game right now. I want to know what your thoughts on that are, because I think that you've got some.
Scott, we agree here. Mike Gesicki is the best value at tight end right now in any platform. Tight end 33 on Underdog. Tight end 33 on Underdog. I know he wasn't fantastic last season, but he was tight end 8 the year before. In 2021, when he wasn't stuck behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and without Tua for a good portion of the season. Now he's in New England with Bill O'Brien as the offensive coordinator. And if y'all forgot, Bill O'Brien was the offensive coordinator when Aaron Hernandez and Gronk were both top 10 tight ends in the same season. They both had over 1,000 receiving yards in that season. I think they both had double-digit touchdowns in that season. Furthermore, Bill O'Brien was Gesicki's offensive coordinator or head coach, at Penn State. So he knows what he's getting in Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki is a big physical slot receiver. He's the Aaron Hernandez type in this offense. Aaron Hernandez had a better season than Gronk that year. We're looking at a guy that could have 1,200 yards receiving, because what else is there to throw to in New England? They've got Kendrick Bourne, Devontae Parker, Juju Smith-Schuster, Tyquan Thornton. I know there are people I'm forgetting because there's so many of them. This guy could be Mac Jones' number 1 receiving target.
Absolutely. I think that between him and Hunter Henry, we could almost see, I'm not going to say the second coming of Gronk and Hernandez, but it could be close. It could be
very
both
close.
Of those tight ends have a ton of value that everybody is sleeping on. So let's go ahead. Yeah, this guy sucks with Chuck Bass. I totally agree with you. Hen dog in the house. Hunter Henry up there for most disrespected tight end around.
It's true.
Why does everybody disrespect Arkansas boys, man? Come on. So let's get into some fades real quick. I want to make sure to get all of your picks in. So we'll just dive right into your quarterback fades.
So my quarterback fade is Deshaun Watson. And this has nothing to do with controversy. It has to do with everything I've been hearing out of camp. The reports have been very bad that he can't complete 2 passes in a row, that he looks confused at times in the offense. And if he's having that much of a problem this early in camp, I don't know that I'm excited about him. Part of it too is that I don't really trust Kevin Stefanski as a head coach. I don't like the offense that they run there. I don't like they got rid of Kareem Hunt and haven't really replaced that pass catching ability because Nick Chubb's not it. They've got Amari Cooper, who I've never been super high on. They've got Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's fine. They got Elijah Moore. Meh. I just don't see it with this offense. And I don't think Deshaun Watson is as good anymore. He had one great season. We've seen guys have one great season and they just never played the same again. Someone I referenced yesterday, Scott Mitchell from the old Miami Dolphins back in the day, had a huge season replacing Marino. Then he got paid by the Lions and he was awful. What if that's what we're looking at with Deshaun Watson? He had one great season. Then he had a bunch of controversy and he'll never be the same player. And at QB9, there's no way I'm touching him. No way. Absolutely no way.
It terrifies me. And admittedly, we've got a player debate series going on at Fantasy Alarm. I chose the pro side on Deshaun Watson. And then yesterday, all of that horrible news came out about how much he's struggling. And I was like, great, this is going to be very fun to write because it doesn't seem like there is a redeeming quality, right? You could say last year that, there was an excuse. He hasn't played. He went to a new team. He was suspended. He was a little bit rusty. But now having a year off and having a year in that system, there's not really an excuse for him to be that bad. So why are we still getting these bad reports unless he is, in fact, bad? I don't like it. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, we talked about it earlier, like the Goff, the Aaron Rodgers. There are so many people in those mid-teens that have so much more upside. Why are you chasing Deshaun Watson? I'm with you. And please don't hold this against me on my article. So we'll go ahead. Mine's Justin Fields. I'll just run through it real quick. He's QB5 on Underdog, and I'm looking at the Vegas lines for passing, rushing, and touchdowns. So if you follow those lines, it puts him at QB6, which is right where he finished last year. But you've got Lamar Jackson, you've got Justin Herbert, you've got Trevor Lawrence with Calvin Ridley now. You've even got Aaron Rodgers, who could jump into that mix. I think that there are just too many other good quarterbacks out there with just as much upside to justify taking Justin Fields at QB5.
That makes sense. I understand the logic.
It's hard to pass on that rushing upside, but I'm like, I can get somebody cheaper that may be better. So, let's jump into your running back fades because these are really interesting too.
Well, I don't want to have people throw anything at me for this one, but Bijan Robinson at RB3 is too high for me, especially after the comments from Arthur Smith the other day where he says, look, y'all are expecting us to give carries to one guy, but if somebody else like Tyler Algier gets the hot hand, we're going to go with him. I was looking at some of the offensive stats for the Falcons last season. Tyler Algier had 210 carries. Cordarrelle Patterson had 150 carries. Almost a split. Patterson doesn't get hurt. That's probably more of an even split in carries there. What makes us think just because they got Bijan Robinson that Arthur Smith's going to change his offensive philosophy? I know Bijan Robinson's talented, and I know he's going to get some looks in the passing game, but Desmond Ritter's the quarterback. How many looks is he really going to get?
It's Arthur Smith seems like the most stubborn dude in the entire league. Like even last year when they were down, they refused to pass. They were like, nope, we're just going to run. We're just going to run. We're going to run. And I think that people are relying on that philosophy to carry over here. But now that you've got Kyle Pitts back healthy, you've got Drake London in his second year, I think it's going to be a little bit more spread out and a little bit more even. And I can't remember his name, but there was a beat reporter saying that they thought Bijan was only going to get around 300 carries, and then Algier was going to sneak in there with about 175, which really does kind of knock down Bijan's value. So not carries, touches, but yeah, we're going to have to see. Mine is Josh Jacobs. I just think RB10 is too expensive, notwithstanding the holdout. I am out on basically all of the Raiders. I think that team is going to be trash. And I think that you agree with your wide receiver fade as well.
Yeah, for everything you said, we don't need to go into it. I'm out on Devontae Adams at wide receiver 10. No desire.
No, it's the thing that stuck out to me was that Josh Jacobs looked good in almost every metric last year. But if you look at the expected points added, it was negative 8.9.
Oof.
Negative 8.9, which was 110. And I know that people are in on Devontae Adams for the same reason. Like, well, he's a good wide receiver. He can do this. He can do that. And I'm like, but if this team's not any good, if Jimmy Garoppolo can't get the ball out, he's not going to score points. That's just how it's going to be. Mine is Christian Watson. He's wide receiver 21 on Underdog.
No.
He's very polarizing. He's super polarizing. Everybody wants to live in those 300-yard multi-touchdown games. But if you look at the games outside of that, he never eclipsed 49 receiving yards in any of those other games. Like, this is a guy who I would take a flyer on in best ball possibly. But as far as season-long redraft, I don't want to argue with myself about whether or not to put him in my lineup and score, 4 points on any given week. I don't like that at all.
He's too touchdown dependent is what it comes down to. If he doesn't score touch, and you're asking that with Jordan Love at quarterback.
Yeah. Yep. And potentially if Jordan Love doesn't succeed and they go back to a more run heavy approach, then Love and Watson aren't going to get those touchdowns anyways, even if they do score. So we're getting up against it. I don't want to keep you for too long, but I do want to get into your tight end fades because this one is le juicy.
So my tight end fade's Kyle Pitts at tight end 6. And I'm sorry, I have been in on Kyle Pitts. I took him first overall in Scott Fishbowl 2 years ago. It's not that there isn't value to be had there, but I'm just afraid of what this Atlanta offense is again. And I think he has value, but it's not at tight end 6. It's at like tight end 10, tight end 11, tight end 12. That's where I'd be willing to take him. It's just too risky for a position that it's hard to find value in, but I think you can find better value like Mike Gesicki in the later rounds and stack up at other positions. Don't waste your pick on Kyle Pitts at 6, tight end 6.
Yeah. And he's still dealing with a knee injury. A couple days ago, he missed practice again after they came out and said, well, the knee's fine. He's back at practice. He's still dealing with that lingering issue. And depending on how you feel about Desmond Ridder, coming out of college, people said that Alec Pierce actually made Desmond Ridder and not the other way around. So this year, we're really going to get to see what that narrative actually was and how good they're going to be. And you can't really have both, right? You can't have the Falcons run Bijan into the ground and then still sustain Kyle Pitts and Drake London.
Right.
Something has to break there. And I'm kind of the opinion that it's Kyle Pitts. So mine's David Njoku at tight end 10, partially because of what you said about Deshaun Watson. That passing game looks disgusting. And I realize that tight end is kind of a wasteland once you get outside the top 3 or 4. But I don't feel like Njoku has that kind of upside I'm looking for in that range. Watson hasn't looked good in camp. They brought in Elijah Moore, who I think is going to be a big part of that offense operating out of the slot. Those targets that Njoku got last year aren't going to be available to him this year. And I'm going to name drop Andrew Cooper again, but what he says all the time is that you want your tight end to be the top 2 in targets on the team, or at least have a pathway to it. And I don't think that Njoku has that. Again, I would rather go with somebody like Laporta, like Gesicki, somebody who has a clear pathway to targets, and draft somebody else with some more upside in that range rather than take a hit just to fill a position spot.
See, my concern with Njoku too would be, how many quality targets is he going to get in that offense?
Right. Oh man, it's so disgusting.
I'm like, really is.
That AFC North is just, they've brought in the Steelers secondary is crazy. Their defense as a whole is crazy good. I mean, the Bengals are just good overall. And then you've got the Ravens, who are kind of an unknown, coming in there and just, if they operate this air raid and just completely shut everything down, what are the Browns going to do? I think that they're going to have to run the ball, manage the clock, and that in and of itself takes away targets from the receivers. So great stuff here, dude. I can't believe that I've already kept you here for so long.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're like, we could talk forever. Like, just pour a couple beers. It's Friday.
Yeah,
it is
right.
Britt's Fantasy Blitz. So let's get blitzed, right?
All right, let's do it.
But no, I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. Just remind everyone where they can follow you on Twitter and where they can find your work.
You can find me at Nate Paulvin on Twitter. All of my work is going to be things that I tweet out. I'm writing for Fantasy Pros. I've got Dynasty Diehards every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And check out the FF Face Off YouTube channel. We've got some really cool stuff coming up. And Britt, thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Oh, I'm excited. Great to see you again. Give Jen all my love.
I will.
All right. Thanks. I'll see you later. All right, guys. We are getting close. This hour has flown by so fast. So in our next segment, let's talk about some underdog because, again, I am a degenerate and I love preseason. Did a couple lineups last night, and Fantasy Alarm has partnered up with Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy has the biggest fantasy football tournament of all time. They are running the Best Ball Mania 4 competition. And if you don't know what best ball is, it's really, really easy. All you do is draft your team, enter Best Ball Mania, and your primary lineup will be entered every single week. There's no waivers, no roster changes, no worrying about who to sit, who to start. Underdog does that for you so that you can create the highest score on a weekly basis. Best Ball Mania 4 is offering the biggest prize ever for a shot at $3 million for first place. Yes, $3 million. Then a ton of other prizes as they pay out down the road. If you haven't signed up for Underdog yet, go over to fantasyalarm.com/underdog or download the app on the App Store and sign up with promo code ALARM. They will match your first deposit up to $100, a 100% match up to $100. That is 4 free entries into this Best Ball Mania 4 contest where you have the chance of winning $3 million. I'll do my best, Dr. Evil here. But I want to talk a little bit, since we have talked about preseason, there was a game last night. Underdog has pick'em entries, and they are so super fun. So we did some future entries yesterday on the Alarm Fantasy Football Show, but I want to switch over to some pick'em contests for this weekend's preseason game. So how you play, you select up to 2 to 5 player stats for your entry and select whether or not that player will go higher or lower than that stat line. Currently, there's a special where you can select higher or lower on Anthony Richardson's stat of half a total yard. Yes, half a total yard. So it's basically a free square. So I'm immediately entering that into my contest. But moving on to tonight's games, I'm looking at Bryce Young and Matt Corral. So Bryce Young only played 12 snaps in the preseason opener against the Jets. He went 4 of 6 with 21 yards. His stats are set at 46.5, but considering we don't really know how much he's going to play, I'm going to pass on this one. But Corral, on the other hand, had a pretty good outing against the Jets. He was 15 of 22 for 126. His stats for tonight are set at 111.5 passing yards. So considering he will likely play the majority of the game, I'm going to say that he's going to go higher. To cap off our Carolina selection, I'm going to look at Raheem Blackshear. In the first game, he only had 1 carry for 2 yards and 2 catches for 4 yards. His stats are set at 29.5 rushing and receiving. So on that, I'm going to go lower. We've got a couple more selections to make to complete our entry. I'm going to go with Tommy DeVito with his stats set at 137.5 passing yards. He really did receive favorable reviews in the first preseason game against the Lions with 155 yards. So on that one, I'm going to go with the higher. Next, we've got Eric Gray with stats of 32.5 rushing and receiving yards. In the last game, he only got 5 carries for 9 yards and 2 catches for 10 yards. Even if he plays a little more in this game, there's a lot of room with his stats, so I'm going to go lower on that one. Now that I've completed my pick'em contest entry, I can choose how much money I want to enter. And if I'm correct on all entries, which, guys in the chat, when am I wrong? I win my contest. So it's that easy. So again, to sign up, go to fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Use the promo code ALARM. First-time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And along with these pick'em contests, they are also running best ball contests, including the Best Ball Mania 4 weekly contest. They also have a new weekly winners best ball. There is something for everyone on Underdog Fantasy. So go on over there, check it out, sign up, and just have some fun playing. It's really awesome. Mr. Scampers said Danny DeVito's the only questionable pick. I get it. He's kind of small, but he does love rum ham. So anybody who loves rum ham, I can put in my contest. So guys, we're getting up against it. This is close to being the end of our show, but I want to remind you, go over to Fantasy Alarm, check out our draft guide, fantasyalarm.com/draft. We've only got 3 weeks until the season, a little bit under. So you'll need to get all that information. Our cheat sheet is updated. We've still got the player debate series going on. The fantasy football cheat sheet has been updated. We've got a ton of shows coming up. Next up from 3 to 4 Eastern is the fantasy football game show from Front Yard Fantasy. From 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Better Sports Betting with Justin Fensterman and Howard Bender. And from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern, we have the MLB DFS live stream with James Grande and John Impemba. So thank you guys so much for joining me. Have a great weekend, Scott. Have a great weekend, Scampers, Skinny McKinney, Dame Overboard, everybody in the chat. We hope to see you Monday. We're going to talk a little bit more about all the action that happened over the weekend, which I'm sure there's going to be a ton. Get on over, sign up for the All Pro package, get on over into our Fantasy Alarm Discord so we can talk about all the things. And thanks for getting blitzed with me. We'll see you Monday.